acá, eh, quienes están acá van a dar el inicio a la sesión, ¿ya? Distinguidos colegas, realmente es un placer presentar en esta ocasión a un profesional cuyo trabajo ha moldeado fundamentalmente la forma en la que interpretamos el subsuelo terrestre. El doctor Naser Meqbel, a quien yo me atrevo a llamar mi amigo personal también, comenzó su carrera con un enfoque riguroso en las complejidades de la geofísica electromagnética. En sus años formativos estuvieron principalmente marcados por una profunda investigación teórica en instituciones de primer nivel, como el Centro Alemán de Investigación de Geociencias, el GFZ, la Universidad de Oregon. Durante el periodo mencionado, Dr. Meqbel identificó un cuello de botella crítico en la disciplina de la geofísica electromagnética relacionada con las limitaciones computacionales de la modelación e inversión en tres dimensiones. Esta observación dio lugar a una colaboración fundamental con el destacado profesor Gary Egbert, con quienes en conjunto desarrollaron el equipo central de investigación, a partir del cual se desarrolló el software MODIM, un sistema de inversión modular de alto rendimiento. Este proyecto no fue solo un logro de software, representó un cambio de paradigma. Al crear una arquitectura adaptable, escalable y paralelizada, Dr. Meqbel y su equipo proporcionaron a la industria las herramientas necesarias para resolver los desafíos más complejos de la imagen, de generación de imágenes del subsuelo, desde depósitos minerales profundos hasta intrincados reservorios geotérmicos. A lo largo de su carrera, el Dr. Meqbel ha logrado cerrar magistralmente la brecha entre la innovación académica y las necesidades de la industria. Su transición hacia la consultoría a tiempo completo a través de 3D Geo Consulting marcó la expansión global de estos esfuerzos y hoy, a través de su firma, proporciona experiencia de alto nivel en inversión tridimensional, adquisición también y procesamiento y toda la cadena de valor del rubro de la magnetotelúrica a organizaciones de todo el mundo, demostrando que las metodologías rigurosas nacidas en el laboratorio de investigación son, de hecho, el estándar de oro para la exploración de recursos a gran escala. Es un honor contar con su presencia para hoy para compartir respecto a sus perspectivas acerca de la integración del trabajo magnetotelúrico con los datos geoquímicos, ¿ya? Em, Así que esta charla va a ser al mismo tiempo dictada en inglés por el doctor Meqbel. Sin embargo, SEGE ha organizado la posibilidad de activar los subtítulos en español si alguien lo requiere. No sé, Juan, si quieres mencionar algo al respecto, Juan Bascur.
O sea, en la barra de herramientas abajo aparece la opción de activar los subtítulos y ahí le puede, o sea, ya está seteado que el idioma de las sesiones en inglés. Y uno puede elegir el idioma que te lo traduce. Funciona, o sea, yo lo probé y más o menos funciona bastante bien, así que así, si es que hubiera algún problema de, ¿cómo se llama?, de idioma, para poder intercambiarnos, que no sea una limitante en realidad, pues la idea de acá es poder intercambiar con los conocimiento técnico y que se pueda sentir abierto a hacer las preguntas en el lenguaje que sea.
Sí, el periodo de Q&A, de preguntas y respuestas al final, va a tener traducción de parte mía o de alguno de los colaboradores, si es que fuera necesario. So I'm going to switch to English now to welcome you, Nasser. We are here really grateful for your presence. This is may, uh, maybe by far our greatest opportunity of sharing a highest level talk given by you since this moment on. So thanks to everyone, and I'm going to be shouted now. And this is Dr. Nasser Meqbel for all of you, Seje Chile 2026.
Sí, muchas gracias, Fernando, para esta presentación y también para Juan y usted también organizar este evento. Y yo espero que voy a compartir con ustedes un poco de experiencia que yo tengo durante este años, 20 o 25 años, trabajando con electromagnético, especialmente con magnetotelúrico. Infelizmente no puedo presentar todo en español, pero después, si ustedes tienen una pregunta en español, voy a intentar. Y como Fernando y Juan dicen que tiene este tools para ayudar nuestra comunicación. So thank you very much again. And yeah, as the title says, targeting deep mineral system using integrated magnetotelluric and geochemical data. This is like this title implies the like sort of final output, like what we wish to see from geophysical data and specifically from magnetotelluric and how we can integrate, calibrate, and make an interpretation based on the geoelectrical model. Of course, I mean, I will go over a couple of aspects, but before, I mean, I lose your attention. Actually, this presentation was part of a presentation I gave this year at BBEC in Canada. And yeah, this is like one of the conclusion slides. So I usually attract audience so that I don't lose their attention or that they run away from the meeting room. You know, this is like a conclusion slide, as I said, and it shows how the 3D inversion uh, make some difference between different aspects. So what we are looking at are two slides extracted from a 3D model from the same data set, the same location, everything the same, except that the approach that we have followed is slightly different in both cases. Like on the left, you have the standard impedance and tipper data inversion. And on the right, you have the phase tensor and tipper inversion, 3D inversion. As you can see here, I mean, I put the geochemical data extracted from one of the drill holes from this survey area. And you can clearly see that the model on the right fits much better in terms of geochemical analysis that we have obtained from the client. So in other words, I mean, that was, as I said, the conclusion and how to get to these results and how to understand the data and magnetotelluric data and how to deal with the processing and inversion. These are all the things that I will cover it in my talk, and hopefully I will be able to explain as much as I can. So actually, I was planning to do some quick introduction, but decided to extend this introduction to MT to cover, I mean, also audience who have a little bit of experience in MT, just to explain some physical and also practical remarks. Also, we'll see why MT becomes more attractive in mineral exploration and the points that are affecting the final results in terms of like survey design, data acquisition, how to count for recording time, for example, 3D inversion, which is the final step in dealing with magnetotelluric data. And as you can see, there are a couple of points that need to be considered before coming to our preferred model. And I will show you the example that I've showed at the beginning with more information. Okay. So magnetotelluric, as you know, I mean, electromagnetic methods in geophysics can be classified into major groups: a passive source and active source. Active source where we inject energy in the subsurface and we measure the responses. Like as you can see here, let me see if I can activate the pointer. Yes. As you can see here, we have the transient electromagnetic, we have DC geoelectric, which is part also of electromagnetic methods. We have CSEM or also CSEMT. Okay. So all of these, they are considered to be an active source. As I said, we inject energy and we measure the response. While MT is a passive source. In other words, we don't need a transmitter and inject energy in the subsurface to measure the responses. We use the natural electromagnetic waves that coming from the interaction of ionosphere and entering or propagating in the subsurface. I guess you are familiar with this chart here in terms of electrical conductivity of various rocks, and as you know, also resistivity and its inverse conductivity. These are the terms that I will use throughout my talk. And the resistivity of the rocks varies from few tens of Siemens per meter to few hundred thousand of ohm meter in terms of resistivity. So we have very conductive materials like massive sulfide, we have graphite, and salt water, as you know, it is also conductive, and we have the mid range of conductivity before going to very resistive rocks like unweathered rocks and igneous metamorphic rocks. They are very resistive material in the subsurface. When we talk about resistivity, it is also important to know that we are talking about the bulk resistivity. That means that is consistent of the resistivity of the rock matrix plus the resistivity of the materials which fuse pores and fractures within that rocks. And this is our interest. I mean, the materials that are inside the pores and fractures, which could be fluids or metals, graphite or sulfide, and they are interconnecting, creating a network of like pores, and that is casing the electrical conductivity that we are measuring with our electromagnetic methods, electric and electromagnetic methods. Now, since it is a passive source, you are wondering from where the source is coming, and we can see that we have two groups, long period data that is depending on the solar activities, that is interacting with ionosphere and creating a current system that is which is penetrates in the subsurface, and based on the contrast in the subsurface induced secondary field, and that's what we measure. In terms of short periods, we also use the lightning, which is also electromagnetic energy, natural one, and this is for short period. So these are the two main sources of energy that we use in magnetotelluric. Magnetotelluric is nothing else than measuring the response of the electromagnetic that is induced in the subsurface. And for that, we need like the sensors. The sensors are nothing else than two electric dipoles that are perpendicular to each other to measure the time variations of the electric field. And to measure the time variations of the magnetic field, we use the so-called induction coils, and they are also aligned parallel and perpendicular to the electric field. So why I'm rotating also this scene here is also to visualize the setting, but also to say that the orientation of your setting doesn't matter in which direction you orient. The most important thing that these components should be parallel and perpendicular to each other. So in which direction you use to orient the whole system, it doesn't matter, because later you can rotate the obtained data mathematically to any coordinate system. So the most important thing to make sure that the components are parallel and perpendicular to each other. In terms of frequency and some definition, when you hear about audio magnetotelluric, broadband MT, and long period MT, they are only definitions for the frequency band that you are interested with and also recording. For example, for mineral exploration and deep groundwater exploration, we use the band which is identified here as audio magnetotelluric, or AMT, which is from 10K hertz to 1 hertz. And in terms of penetration depth, it's like from 50 meters down to 2 kilometers, more or less. For geothermal exploration, we use the broadband data. and to get down to like 20 kilometers and beyond that. So, and for crustal and deep tectonic studies, we use usually the long period data that is from 10 hertz or 1 hertz more or less up to 10,000 or 20,000 second in terms of period. So these are the different frequency band and their applications. Now the question is, I mean, since we are using the same sensors, the same equipment for all of these bands, it is just a matter of how long you record in the fields to obtain the required frequency band. Okay, so this is very important to know that the recent hardware equipment, they could cover all these bands with the same setting. So in other words, if you set up a station and leave it for like a couple of hours, you will get the very, very high frequency. Leave it for overnight, which our preference to get the AMT data. And if you leave it for 2, 3 days, you will get the broadband data. And if you leave it for like 10 days or 2 weeks or more than this, you will get the long period data with good quality. So it depends on how long you measure in the subsurface. Yeah, how deep you can go, it's also not only a matter of the periods that you are measuring, but also on the subsurface conductivity. And I guess you've heard the term skin depth. So the skin depth is just a measure on how deep you can get in the subsurface. And also it is at which depth the energy drops to like 30% of its initial amplitude. And since it is subject to subsurface conductivity and the period, so for long period and or resistive subsurface, we will get deep penetration, while high frequency or short periods and conductive structure, the penetration depth is very shallow, as illustrated here in this figure here, where we have long period penetrating very deep, or the energy will penetrate very deep. Here, like we would say broadband data, they don't penetrate that depth, while high frequency data, the investigation depth is very shallow. Now, to explain that in 3D, I, like long time ago, created this kind of the time variations of the electric field using a synthetic model. So what we are looking at here is a slide from a 3D model in which I am using the amplitude of the electric field to color the section and the arrow of polarization of the electric field. And the model I have used, it has a conductive structure in that part here and resistive structure in that part. So it is like two main features in this model, just two parts, conductive and resistive part. So and at the top part here, we see the ionosphere, the electric field, and the ionosphere. And as you can see here, once the energy penetrate in the conductive structure, the energy will decrease very fast when going in depth. However, in the resistive part, we see that the arrows and the energy is still large enough and penetrate very deep. So that means in the resistive part, we will get higher penetration depth, while in the conductive part, the penetration depth is very shallow. So because the energy will decay very fast. Let me see here. Okay, now, as I said, what we measure in the field, nothing else than the time variations of the electric and magnetic field. And usually we measure this 5 component, the electric field in both perpendicular direction, EX, EY, and the 3 magnetic component, BX, BY, and BZ. So these are the time series that we usually measure in any magnetotelluric device available in the market. Now, we take this time series, pass it to a processing code to obtain the so-called various data type that we will use later in our interpretation and also in the inversion and creating the electrical conductivity model. So we'll start with the impedance tensor, or the letter Z, that is for impedance. And this is nothing else than relating the horizontal electric field to the horizontal magnetic field. And as you can see here, all the quantities here are a function of frequency, omega. So for each frequency, we will get the impedance tensor, which is 2 by 2 tensor, and that will relate the horizontal electric and magnetic field component. Another transfer function that we can get from our measured data is the vertical magnetic transfer function, TZ or tipper, and that is relating the horizontal magnetic field to the vertical magnetic field. And based on this quantity, we will get, as I said, tipper data, which is very important, by the way, in the mineral exploration, as you noticed from the first slide that I've showed, in which I have inverted the phase tensor and tipper, and also the impedance tensor and tipper. So it is very important, and I can show you later and discuss with you a couple of examples related to this quantity. Moreover, what we can obtain from these 5 time series is the so-called phase tensor, derived from the impedance data. And this is nothing else than the imaginary part to real part of the impedance tensor. And it is very valuable information for analyzing the data, as well as later to invert the data, as I showed in the first slide. So the impedance tensor data can be decomposed and presented as here in a tensor form. And from this tensor, we can derive the individual component in terms of apparent resistivity and phases. So in other words, I mean, the apparent resistivity is the magnitude for each component, and the phases are obtained from this complex number. So these are the 2 parameters that we usually use when interpreting the magnetotelluric data. And yeah, for the MT method, there are a couple of practical field setups, and I will go over them individually and discuss with you the positive and negative sides of each setting. Now, the standard setting of magnetotelluric side, as explained on that diagram here, we have the 2 dipoles and the 3 magnetic coils, right, with these kind of distances, 50 meters or 100 meters dipoles. There are other setup, which is to accelerate the acquisition, and in which we usually measure only the 2 perpendicular electric field component, EX, EY, at each station. And on, like in that example here, on the 3rd station, we measure the magnetic field as well, the horizontal one. The idea here is that when processing the data to get the impedance tensor, for example, you can use the magnetic field, which is measured at this point, and use it at that point to get the full tensor. Because if you remember from the previous slides, we need the horizontal magnetic and electric field to get the full tensor data. So that will accelerate the data acquisition a little bit, on the assumption that the magnetic field doesn't vary that much over a survey area, especially if we are talking on a high dense survey like this one here. If you imagine that is like 50 meters dipole length, then each 100 meters you are measuring the magnetic field, which is still valid to process the data at each point to get the full impedance data. Again, doesn't matter in which direction this kind of survey will be measured, because later you can rotate to any coordinate system, but you only need to make sure that all of these components are perpendicular and parallel to each other. So if you rotate the whole system, it will not affect the data. You can rotate them later to any coordinate system again. Probably, I mean, in some applications, you do it like perpendicular to known geological strike direction to get the maximum influence or response on your data. There is another sparse arrays like MIMDAS or EMAP setting, in which you don't measure the perpendicular component of, in this example, EX. You just measure inline the electric field and get and measure the magnetic field at some sparse points. In that case, you will get only one row of the impedance tensor, which is for 3D inversion is not that good in my opinion. So you have to be careful with this kind of data. So you will get like 2D, sort of 2D data, not 3D like the impedance, the full impedance tensor data. In terms of like going a little bit to control source style data, and specifically to CSEMT, in which we inject current via a transmitter electric dipole, which is far enough to ensure plane wave assumption required for the MT method. So in that case, you set up your electric dipole far from your survey area, and you start measuring the electric field again inline. And if you wish, you can take it in another direction. The same way you measure the magnetic field component. This method, the CSEMT, is logistically is demanding, of course, because these kind of dipoles, I mean, they are far and long enough, like at least 2 kilometers of dipole you need to set up to get good energy in the subsurface. And the transmitter itself, it should be powerful transmitter. In locations where the noise is very high, this kind of methods is recommended. Another type of field setup is the airborne style. Here I will start with the semi-airborne EM. So the same idea, you have an electric dipole injecting the energy in the subsurface, and with a drone or with airplane, you can measure the magnetic field, the three component of the magnetic field. This kind of data are also valuable for like shallow investigation. I would say down to 200 meters with high resolution data. So usually you just measure the magnetic field above like specific points, and you process your data to get the electrical conductivity model as well. There is another method now back to natural source, the so-called ZM data, in which you measure the only the vertical magnetic component in the air, and use a reference point on which you measure the horizontal magnetic transfer function. If you remember, I mean, it is nothing else than taper data. However, the vertical component of the magnetic field is measured in the air. If you remember, we need to have the horizontal and vertical component to get taper. So it is basically taper, however, measured in the air. This method is also has valuable data, and it could map the horizontal discontinuity in the subsurface, and it is very important for mineral exploration. The mobile data, it is like if you compare it with ZTEM, so in mobile MT data, This is also natural source EM, depends on natural source EM field. However, in mobile MT, what we do or what service provider do, they measure the electric field at one specific point as a reference point, and they measure the three component of the magnetic field in the field. So using this component, the three magnetic and the two electric at one reference point, one can get the transfer function, as explained in the previous slides, that you need the horizontal magnetic and horizontal electric to get the impedance, and to get taper, you will get the vertical from the air and the horizontal on the air. The only issue with this method, in my opinion, of course, maybe I am wrong, maybe somebody has much more experience with that. However, I model this data and I observe a couple of things. In my opinion, I mean, the issue here that we are interested mostly in the variations of the electric field rather than the magnetic field. As explained before, if I go back a little bit here, for example, on that setting, or let us go to natural one, this setting here, for example, we said that you can collect data, magnetic data in a sparse manner, like each second or third point you can measure the magnetic field on the assumption that the magnetic field doesn't change that much across the survey area. However, the electric field carries most of the changes of the electrical conductivity of the subsurface. Now, if you do the opposite, like in the mobile MT data, so you are not measuring the variations of the electric field across the survey area. You are measuring only the variations of the magnetic field. Now, I will switch quickly to another presentation that I have prepared for another purposes, but is just to show you and share with you the forward modeling that I have did for MT and compared two main outputs, namely following the same idea of mobile MT. You have a point at which you measure or calculate in that case, because I use it for synthetic explanation. You calculate the electric field at one point and calculate the magnetic field in the air. And using this 5 component, you can calculate the impedance tensor. Now, I use a simple model. As you can see here at the bottom, this is only a cross-section from a 3D model. And I have the reference point here and like a simple target, like a 2D model actually, but modeled in 3D, in which we have a background resistivity of 100 ohm meter, and we have the conductive structure of 10 ohm meter located in the middle. And here, this experiment is to vary the electrical conductivity around the reference site here. Okay, so in the first forward modeling, the electrical conductivity around the reference site was 1 ohm meter. Okay, and these are the data that we are getting. So I will fix the scale here. And each color of these lines representing the frequency. I'm using the frequency range that is usually used in mobile MT data. What I will do now is to keep everything the same, except changing the electrical conductivity around the reference station, namely only these two cells in the 3D model. And as you can see here now, if I make it like 10 ohm meter, these are the responses that we will get. If we make it 100 ohm meter, this is the responses that we will get. Of course, I mean, these data, they show the 100 ohm meter, the background resistivity. And once the data enter in the target or the discontinuity in that location, we'll see a drop in the apparent resistivity before it comes back to the background resistivity. Now, if I go higher, make it more resistive. The subsurface around the reference station. Sorry, we'll see this kind of variations here. And yeah, I mean, I just like explained here or show you, especially if it is conductive structure around the reference station and the difference between various conductivity. Now I changed the setting, and instead of having a reference electric field, I make it like normal magnetotelluric, and measuring the same model, measuring the variations of the electric field and having the magnetic field at one reference point. And this is what you will get in with the same variations of the electrical conductivity around the reference point. Again, this is 1 ohm meter. You will see that these points will be affected, of course, measuring like here the 10 ohm meter. This is like traditional MT, but with magnetic field at one specific point. Now, if I change it to 10 ohm meter, this is what you will get if you change it to 100 ohm meter and if you change it to 1000 ohm meter. As you can see here, I mean, I will go also just quickly here. Yeah, from the conductive, a little bit conductive and similar to the background resistivity and more resistive. The responses, they don't change that much. And this is what would expected or what we will expect from measuring the variations of the electric field. Okay. Now I'll go back to that one here. Okay. Yeah. So this is the mobile MT data. Again, there might be from my side, I mean, maybe some misunderstanding of the methods, but based on the description that I've read it in various like reports and publications, that what has been done with this method is only measuring the electric field at one point. And as we saw from that forward modeling experiment, the resistivity around the reference point affects the whole survey. While the opposite way, where we measure the variations of the electric field, the resistivity around the reference point doesn't affect that much. Yeah, quickly on the inversion process, I will not make a specific talk on the inversion, but I thought like I will show one or two slides explaining the inversion process in simple words. Now, you have a measured data, like this section here presented as a pseudo section or sounding curve of magnetotelluric data. And what we have usually on our pseudo section are the apparent resistivity and phases as a function of periods, right? So in order to convert the apparent resistivity to resistivity and periods to depth, that is what we need to run the inversion. Here is like a simple 2D example, conductivity and for the 2D modeling. And for that, you need to discretize the subsurface in cells. And for each cell, you need to let the inversion get the conductivity, which will explain and fit your data. So in few words, the inversion is nothing else than going from data space to model space. And this is the inversion in a few words. It is in 1D, 2D, or 3D is the same idea. Okay. Now, yeah, I will like talk here now, start talking about the use of magnetotelluric in mineral exploration. And the general opinion on MT, whenever you talk with people that heard about MT before, they think it is like for long period and deep geophysical exploration, crustal studies, upper mantle studies, and so on. And also they have the opinion that low resolution, uppermost crust near the surface, and it is not attractive for mineral exploration, especially if we are talking about near surface target as what we do for mineral exploration. However, that was previously. Now, since like 10, 15 years, more or less, and even a little bit earlier, hardware and software has been developed a lot. So high frequency data is becoming more sophisticated using the hardware and also the processing software. Also, compared to another active electric and electromagnetic sources, MT has a better penetration depth. So you can go easily to 1.5, or even 2 kilometers with even AMT data, right? And this is also becoming more and more attractive for mineral exploration. Logistically, it is less demanding when compared to another method, and that will take us to think in 3D, not anymore running the data on profile, you know, because the logistically is very easy. You can set up your station on a grid, for example, to have a good coverage later for a 3D inversion. Survey design. So it is one of the most important point also to design your survey. Again, I mean, going from the old school where magnetotelluric data are collected along a profile, it has been also floating around in many places. And when talking to clients, they still prefer to run magnetotelluric along profiles. It is taken from the IBDC method. So they think that MT is as electric and electromagnetic method. So it is more or less like running IB or DC. Unfortunately, it is not the case because you don't have to run your MT
Nasser,
along profile.
I think you're not
Yes?
showing your screen.
No? Sorry, sorry. Did I stop sharing? No, I'm sharing here. Let me stop. Do you see my screen now?
Yes, it's there. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, as I said, I mean, it is from old school that some clients, I mean, they think MT is like IP and DC, so they prefer to run it along profile. However, it is not the case. You don't need to run your MT stations along a profile. This is an example. I mean, one client asked us to run the survey on these two profiles. However, the target is 3D. I will activate the laser here. So the target is located within like the cross point of between these two profiles, and it has, based on the geological information that we got, it has a 3D nature. So we proposed a couple of things so that we have a better coverage and have a better 3D view on the subsurface. So of course, we propose a couple of survey depending on the budget, depending on the time constraint for the client, and so on. However, the idea is to have these kind of grids, either high resolution or sparse grid. But the main point here is not thinking in 3D in 2D anymore. So because of the availability of 3D codes and the computation resources, as we'll see in a second, they are available. So it is much better to think in 3D. And overall, that the subsurface is to great extent a 3D at specific frequency, you will start to see a 3D effect in your data. It doesn't matter where you measure. So that is also the beauty of magnetotelluric, that at any point, since we are measuring the five component of the electric EM fields, you will get a 3D, the data are affected by 3D subsurface structure. Okay, so another point that I also like to share with you is the idea of how long you record your data. Now we are still in the AMT range, let us say. So, AMT data, and specifically for mineral exploration. And I have here an example in which we measured at one station around 18 hours. However, to explain the idea, the data and the quality of the data, they are different depending on the time during the day and also in the night. So what I did is took these 18 hours and split them in 3 hours and processed only 3 hours. So for example, now the first slide here, it shows the processing results between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. As you can see, we have like up to 10 seconds or something, relatively good data. However, starting from above 10 seconds, the data start to be scattered. Tipper data, they are very noisy in that part. Yeah, I mean, here we have apparent resistivity phases and tipper data on the right-hand side. This here figure shows you the coherence between the two perpendicular components, namely EX and HY. And of course, with the good data, or we are approaching or hoping to have a correlation of 1 to have good data, right? But as you can see here, the level is like between 0.5 and 0.7 in terms of coherency between these two components. Now, I took the other 3 hours between 2 p.m. and 5 p.m. And as you can see here, the data get worse in terms of quality. The same station, okay, just split the time series and start processing in 3 hours segment. As you can see here, the apparent resistivity phases get completely destroyed. And yeah, I mean, probably some cultural activities during this time here or another source of noise that is affecting the apparent resistivity as well as tipper data. As you can see also in terms of coherency, it drops dramatically at this period here, which is very obvious. And you can see it very clearly in the quality of the data. Now, taking another or the next 3 hour segment from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m., the data becoming more, I mean, in terms of quality, they are becoming more and more sophisticated. As you can see, the apparent resistivity and phases, as well as tipper data. Also, the coherency is becoming higher. Now, if you take the next 3 hour segment from 8 p.m. to 11 p.m., the data even better here, and so on. And you can keep an eye on the coherency here. We have the dead band here, as you can see it very clearly here. And also now during the night from 11 p.m. to 2 a.m., the data are becoming even better, and so on. So till we start again the segment in the next day, the data becoming, as you can see here, becoming more noisy. Probably cultural activities like some farmers around or some machines, they start to work and so on. So the data becoming more noisy. This is like a summary of this experiment of processing the data. And the main conclusion point here is that the best quality of the data are recorded between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. the next day. And these are the 6 hours. These are the three, and these are the other three data. So we highly recommend collecting data overnight. You could have like areas where you don't have cultural noise. One could argue, okay, we are in a remote area. There are no much cultural noise. So there is no need to measure like 20 hours or 24 hours or so on, or overnight. So 1 or 2 hours during the day will be enough. To some extent, this is valid. However, there are a couple of issues here. So if you don't get enough time series, you might not get to your frequency that you are targeting. And also, if for some reason your time series is corrupted or has some issues, you don't have enough time series to process your data. So you have to repeat the stations again. So, and also during the night, the energy is higher, so you will have a better signal during the night. So our main conclusion here is overnight data, even if we are talking about AMT, which is in some discussion, we've heard that, yeah, AMT data, just have an hour or something, and everything will be fine. It's unfortunately not the case. In our company, for example, the first 30 minutes, we use them just for testing the connection of the instrument, the some noise source, and so on. So it is not a measurement for us, 30 minutes or 1 hour. It is just for testing and leaving the instrument measuring overnight in all of our survey that we are running around the world. Data processing is very important. So this is another step that you need to consider while working with magnetotelluric data. So all of these steps that I've started with the model design, survey specification, and data processing to get to 3D inversion, all of them will affect your final results. So if you don't have a good design, if you don't have a good survey parameters, if you don't have processing, of course, you will not get good results in terms of inversion. So neither 1D, 2D, or 3D will give you good results if you don't work on all of these steps carefully. Now, data processing is very important also. So you need to spend time on data processing, and don't believe that the inversion will fix anything for you later. Okay, so if you provide the inversion, doesn't matter which dimension, if you provide noisy data, you will get a wrong model. So either you clean your data or reprocess your data to get better results later when you invert your data. So this is an example from field processing. Again, we use this kind of quick and dirty processing just to check a couple of aspects on the data. For example, if the connection is good, if there is something wrong with the instrument, the electrodes, the coil, we can discover it immediately. When looking, for example, here on the high frequency part of the data. So we can see that there is some information and they are correct in terms of connections, in terms of equipment, everything is fine. And also you can see it in tipper data. But this is not our final processing, of course. So it is just to check in the field that everything is fine. Now, once we finish the recording overnight again, we take this data and run office processing, and this is what you will get. For example, I'm using the same site here, and you can see the difference after applying filtering, robust processing, and careful processing. So it is not only pushing a button in a software to get your data. You have to be careful, looking carefully at the time series, analyzing where is the signal get worse and good, and select the correct parameters in order to get the best quality of your data. So I will switch back and forth, and you can see the difference between the two processing we usually run in our campaign. 3D inversion, yes. So I have a couple of words or sentences to share with you regarding 3D inversion. It is becoming increasingly affordable because we have cloud computing, CPU, GPUs. There are a lot of 3D inversion codes. They are available either from academic colleagues or from industry. So these are not a big deal nowadays. Seriously, I mean, You can run a 3D inversion on the cloud. You can assign 100 or even 1,000 of CPU on any of these commercial cloud provider like Google or Microsoft or Amazon, right? And they can provide you CPU or GPU. And 3D inversion code, as I said, there are a lot available, including Modium. That is we believe this is the most used in academic worlds and also to great extent in commercial worlds as a tools for 3D inversion for magnetotelluric data. All of these, I mean, cloud computing and codes, they are tools, and the 3D version is not straightforward. Like processing, like survey design, like any other steps in the magnetotelluric, it should be done more carefully. So, for example, you need to carefully grid your subsurface. So, using wrong gridding, you will end up with wrong responses and not fitted data. Which data type to select is also important. Impedance stepper or phase tensor or joint inversion between all of them. This is also important to consider while running a 3D inversion. Which kind of error setting or error floor you need to use on your data. This is also very important. And a few other inversion parameter which need to be selected carefully. So again, it is 3D inversion, as I always say. It is not pushing a button and then you will wait that the inversion code will get you the correct answer with any like a default setting. There is no, in my opinion, there is no default setting. And I seriously, each time I have to invert the data, I need to spend time and not using the default. So I have some defaults, of course, but usually I experiment with them to see if we will get better results or not. Like for example, I mean, if you ask me how we do or the way that I run the 3D inversion, again, from the standard five components that we measure, again, we get the impedance stepper and phase tensor data. And I usually invert them individually. So invert the impedance data alone, tipper alone, and phase tensor alone, and then start making a combination of these three data types. And of course, we'll keep eye on or based on geological information shared by the clients or geochemical data or whatever available information to calibrate, I mean, to come closer to our preferred model. The same way for error setting. So there is no a default setting. So you need to experiment what is the best error floor you need to use to run your data and get a good result. And yeah, I will show you in this synthetic study the output from combining impedance, tipper, and phase tensor data. As I said, usually we invert them individually before we start combining this data type. Now, the synthetic model is to a great extent based on some results that we got for one of our clients. And the survey or the structure, the client is expecting to have some conductive anomalies in that part of the survey area. And these are the points that we have measured. And we will be able to image this kind of conductive anomaly. So I took that model from the real world data and simplified in terms of conductive structure here, aligned in north, west, southeast. And this is like a cross section from that 3D model along A prime here, the white line. So this is the true model. And I start inverting the data. And as probably most of you working with magnetotelluric data and 3D inversion or 2D inversion, we usually start from a homogeneous half space. That means we don't add any assumption or any constraint in the model, and we let the data derive for us the electrical conductivity model that explains the measured data. Now, this is the starting model, 100 ohm meter. And I started with the impedance tensor alone. And this is like what you will get in terms of structure. We have a good indication that there is a good conductive anomaly or the conductive anomaly that we have used in the synthetic model and the resistive background here. Now, if I invert only tipper data, this is what you will get. So mainly the conductive anomaly appears in the model. However, the top of this conductive anomaly, as you can see here, is upshifted. So it should be here, while in the inversion of impedance tensor, in tipper data only, the top of it is much shallower. If I use the phase tensor data only, then we will see also that there is an indication that there is the conductive anomaly appears here. However, the top is a bit deeper than the original or the true model. Now, if we start to combining the data type, for example, here, combining the impedance plus tipper data, the amplitude of the conductive anomaly is becoming enhanced, and also the dimension and the geometry of this the conductive anomaly is becoming more clear here. And if you combine phase tensor and tipper data, it is becoming also obvious here in terms of the depth to the top and also the geometry of the conductive anomaly. Yeah, now this is that was the synthetic study, and here is the a real world example, and I will discuss it in more details. And this is the model from which I have extracted the slide or the section on the first slide. Now, the client collected data along, above all of these black dots here. That was like the grid of empty stations to have a good coverage for a 3D inversion. And to be honest with you, I mean, the drill hole exists before the empty survey. So the client, they already know that there is mineralization at that point here. Okay, so we didn't direct the client for this kind of conductive anomaly, and then they drilled. No, the drill hole was existing, and they had the geochemical data. Now, again, looking at that section here, A prime across this conductive anomaly and where the drill hole is located, again, it is the same section that I've showed at the beginning. So it shows a good indication and correlation between the geochemical data inside the drill hole and the conductive anomaly that we have obtained from inverting the phase tensor and tipper data. When we inverted the impedance and tipper data, everything was resistive, as I showed on the first slide. So without knowing that there are some geochemical data in this area, we will deliver the model like standard way impedance and tipper, and there is no indication for any conductive anomaly in the subsurface. And that will be not good for, of course, for the interpretation and the end result to the client. However, the effort that we do again is to experiment with various data type and compare with the available geological and whatever geoscientific data, like in this case, geochemical data. So in other words, the model of inverting phase tensor and tipper was much more stable and also preferred in terms of comparing with other geoscientific data, and we use it for the interpretation. Now, the client was interested to know, okay, if I have here the mineralization, how is the spatial extension of this anomaly? And we start to indicate some like potential area for further drilling. Like the same target here, it has like northwest southeast extension. So they might be interested to drill more drill holes along that strike here. In addition, we indicated that based on the 3D modeling of the magnetotelúric data, we indicated three more potential areas. They are also oriented to more or less in north-south direction. If we take a cross section across all of these three or four anomalies, the known one here, as I said, from the drill hole, and the new ones that we observed in our 3D modeling, you will see that they are very nice conductive anomalies and based on some geological indication and also surface geology and geochemistry, there is a good indication that they might be related to some mineralization process. So the client is right now drilling for this anomaly here, and hopefully soon we will see the results of the drill information. They were also interested, I mean, to some extent also in this conductive anomaly at greater depth, but we are still discussing, I mean, together with the client, the nature of this kind of anomaly. The main anomalies are these three ones, and as I said, the client is right now trying to explore that and drill these anomalies. Yeah, I'm going toward the end of my talk. So, message to take home: to obtain the best result with empty data, it is very important to have and consider the following points: survey design, acquisition, the acquisition parameters, of course, processing and modeling. Again, any step of this needs to be done in a good way. Another conclusion point, tipper data are very important, especially if we are talking about mineral exploration. And I can show you, if you are interested, other examples or models in which the vertical component or tipper data, they were very valuable and added a lot to the final model. 3D arrays and 3D modeling interpretation is necessary to extract most useful information from them. Empty data and identifying new targets for the end clients. As per any geophysical technique, the best way to decrease uncertainty is the integration of geological, geochemical, and geophysical information. Again, I mean, on that point, if I come to you with only electrical conductivity model, you as a geologist or the final guy who is going to interpret and indicate your client, without integration, don't believe my electrical conductivity model. So it is still electrical conductivity. And in order to give it a meaning and interpretation, integration is very important. With that, I would like to thank all of you for listening. And yeah, if you have any questions, I am available to discuss. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Naser. This has been really, really great. It was a great presentation, so thank you very much. We're opening questions now. Estimados colegas de habla hispana, por favor, sus consultas, ya sea levantando la mano o agregándolas en el chat, como prefieran. Me imagino que hay algunas preguntas, así que, por favor, adelante. No quiero partir con la mía, que es más latera. Don Juan, por favor, don Juan Bascuro.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. It was great. I have a question about galvanic distortion because last week we were discussing in our group about if it's useful or not using TEM for calibrating the response and try to correct the galvanic distortion. And this was a practice that I think was very used 20 years ago, but today I think nobody is doing that thing. So what do you think about this? Is useful or not to use TEM measured along with empty stations? And what, I don't know, the current approach to correct galvanic distortion?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. If you look at this point, if you take it only, I mean, it's useful.
Please,
Whatever you
excuse me,
measure.
please, Nasser. Excuse me,
Yeah.
before you answer, I want to translate that.
Okay.
Estimado Juan, acaba de preguntar a Nasser respecto al static shift, al corrimiento estático, del cual estuvimos discutiendo en nuestro grupo la semana pasada. Así que en función de eso está la consulta hecha por Juan y en función de eso la respuesta de Nasser. So please, Nasser, go ahead. Sorry,
Yeah,
the interruption.
no worries at all. No, I mean, whatever you measure will add value to your interpretation, no doubt about it. I mean, even if you want to use it for galvanic distortion, static shift correction, whatever you measure at the same point, it will add value for the interpretation. Now, for static shift correction, I mean, galvanic distortion, we argued once in one paper with others. I mean, we publish it with other colleagues that in 3D, usually if you invert your data in 3D, you don't need to correct your data for static shift. So if you discretize the subsurface in the upper part fine enough, in the vertical direction, you will allow the inverter to accommodate this small near surface feature that will correct for static shift. That was one of the argument that we use. So again, I mean, it is good if you can measure it, of course, to correct for your data. But as you said, I mean, nowadays, nobody is doing that. You may be correcting your data using another assumption, or as I am saying here, to use the 3D inversion to let it compensate for the static shift on your data. I don't have an example available right now to show you that even if you have statically shifted data, then the 3D inversion will fit the data in a good way.
Okay, great. Thank you. Fernando, tu micrófono está apagado.
Gracias, Juan. Estaba diciendo que en el fondo Nasser respondió que cualquier medición que uno haga complementa la data de manera positiva. Sin embargo, hoy en día, como también lo habíamos discutido, las inversiones tridimensionales tienen la capacidad de corregir, ¿no es cierto?, los efectos del corrimiento estático. Así que en el fondo nuestra conversación en torno al tema está bastante adecuada, así que súper bien. Vi una mano arriba de mi amigo personal, Nicolás Anguita. ¿Se arrancó la mano o va a preguntar, don Nicolás?
Sí, sí, aquí estoy. Muchas
Adelante,
gracias,
Nicolás, por
Naser.
favor.
Voy a preguntar en español para que se entienda mejor.
Dale.
Ahí tú me traducís. Quería preguntar cómo específicamente era el tema de correlacionar con los datos geoquímicos. Si se hace primero como un modelamiento elemental, digamos, o multielemental, y con eso, digamos, después se hace la inversión, o si de alguna manera ya teniendo los datos químicos se esfuerzan los parámetros para llegar a una correlación, digamos. Y desde qué punto de vista eso después puede ser un proceso iterativo en que uno va calibrando su inversión mientras tiene más datos.
Okay. Do you need translation, Nasser?
If
Did
I
you get it?
correctly understood, no, I mean, we didn't constrain, for this example, for example, we didn't constrain the 3D inversion based on some geochemical data. First, because I mean, you cannot compare the geochemical data to electrical conductivity and add it in your model. Here it is about integration. Again, I mean, using this data, geochemical data, to come closer to the interpretation. So again, if I used the standard way of inverting impedance and Tibor data, and I will believe in the model and say, okay, there is no conductive anomaly at this part here. Again, I will go to the first slide here. This is again, I mean, inverting the data like not blindly, but like following the standard way. Okay, we inverted impedance and taper data. This is what usually done. And as you can see here, at the location of the drill hole, there is no conductive anomaly. While the clients, they already know, I mean, they have the drill hole before they run the empty survey. Okay. Now, you start thinking, I mean, what's wrong here? Is the data wrong? The data are well fitted. I mean, the quality of the data was perfect. The fitting was perfect. However, there is no indication of any conductive anomaly. But when you invert using the phase tensor and Tipper data, you start to see that conductive anomaly. Okay. And you integrate it with the geochemical data, you will get a better interpretation. And as I explained later, that using the 3D model, you could indicate a new potential area for your client. If I correctly understood your model, your question, the short answer is no. We didn't constrain the model to follow any geochemical constraint or any other constraint. So we start from a homogeneous half space and let the data tell us the story. So it is a data-driven model.
Thank you, Naser. Thank you, Naser. Básicamente, Nicolás, no hay un constraint, un constreñimiento del modelo a partir de esto, sino que simplemente, en el fondo, una capacidad de recuperar la información. Si, por favor, Katarzyna, adelante, por favor.
Hola, buenas tardes. Hi, Naser. It's very glad to see you.
Hi, how
I
are you
have,
doing?
yeah, I have exactly question about this, the very first slide. I mean, maybe this is a little bit philosophical, but what we have in this phase tensor that it makes it so useful for us. I mean, if we do it only with impedance, we will lost information, as you said, and we add the information from phase tensor. And I was wondering, what makes it so useful? I mean, some physical properties?
Well, it is more sensitive to these kind of small variations in the subsurface. So you can see the conductive anomaly clearer than the only the impedance and taper data. This is my short answer on this. I mean, I've analyzed this model and seriously, I mean, you can see like in other areas of that impedance and taper data model, you can see in some other region there are conductive anomaly, but specifically on that location, the phase tensor, they were much more useful to obtain this kind of structure here. Again, I mean, one could use the impedance and taper and say, tell the client here without knowing that there is some geochemical data here. And this is the model. Maybe you indicate to another conductive anomaly in this 3D model. However, I mean, if you have this information from a drill hole and you know that there is a high grade copper in that part here at this depth, then you start to believe that this model is more realistic and that the phase tensor, the variations in the phase tensor, they are more sensitive to this kind of conductive anomaly.
Yeah, so the motivation to use the phase tensor was to see it in the drill data, in this case.
The motivation, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. It was nice to see you, and
Thank
see
you
you
very
next
much,
time.
Katja. Thank you.
Thank you, Katarzyna. Voy a leer ahora una pregunta de don Ronald Yupa, de IGMED Perú. ¿Todavía estás ahí, Ronald? Dice, question about data processing and uncertainty modeling. If your targeting workflow appears to rely heavily on the special correspondence between empty conductivity anomalies and geochemical vectors, how do you quantify and propagate inversion uncertainty, particularly the effects of static shift, the dimensionality assumptions, and regularization choices into the final targeting model? And have you tested whether the same geochemical correlations persist across an ensemble of acceptable inversion solutions? Meaning, uh, I don't know how to summarize this, Ronald. Maybe you want to jump in to explain your question in a better way.
Yeah, it is a long question, and I get lost, to be honest. I
Yeah.
mean,
I mean,
there
I
are
think that there is some
few
uncertainties
points.
between geochemical and the MT overall possible errors in the path that could be interacting with each other. So maybe Ronald, you want to clarify, or do we try to decipher your
He says
question?
that his microphone is
Uh,
not working. Ah, there is.
Hello guys, I'm Jesus Garcia, but Ronald is next to me. Ronald gonna talk, we using my microphone, right? Give me one
Yeah,
Thank
second.
you.
sure.
Hi, Fernando.
Hi, Ronald. How are you? Go ahead. Go ahead.
Long time.
Hi, Rolando. So, what was the question? I mean, if you can split it and
Yeah.
point per point so that we can discuss it and try to answer it.
Ronald, estamos tratando de ver si podemos entender mejor tu pregunta
Mm,
para poder responderla. Si quieres, por favor, hacerla de manera directa
mhm.
y podríamos intentar responderla, por favor.
Okay. Uh, First of all, we already have the 3D model, and we have already some conductivity anomalies. We have a conductivity pattern. And
Yes.
then, of course, we are talking about the geochemistry data. So we
Mhm.
insert the geochemistry data into the model, and we have some geochemical vectors, we geochemical threshold, right? Until
Yes.
there, okay, maybe it's clear. How do you now, in this model where we are inserting the geochemical data, of course, we will have some uncertainties. Probably the static shift for me now is clear. It's not really important in the 3D model, but probably it's the dimensionality assumptions and this regularization choices can be affect my interpretation. Um,
Yeah. Okay. Let
is
us
what
stop at this point. I mean, the regularization. It's a good point, and you can see it here. I mean, part of the regularization that we use here, for example, the smoothing. You see that the model is smooth around this conductive anomaly. Now, if you want to be more certain and make another experiment, you can play with the smoothing to come like to what is the extension of this conductive anomaly. You can reduce the smoothing, for example, and maybe going a little bit farther in terms of model resolution study, like adding a specific conductive structure here, manually constrain your model by saying, okay, the width of this conductive anomaly is like 100 meter, and constrain your model to, or force your 3D inversion to be exactly around this dimension here. So this is a model resolution study. Of course, you can do it.
yeah, okay, all right.
So, but I agree with you. I mean, there is some regularization here that is affecting the spatial extent of this conductive anomaly. Or in other words, like, okay, is this conductive anomaly really goes that width across this on this section, or it is localized in a specific area? Again, a model resolution study will answer these kind of questions.
Thank you. Thank you. ¿Tenemos más preguntas? Do we have more questions? Um, Yo quisiera hacer una consulta. I would like to make a question, Nasser. Um, MT is growing really fast for the past few decades, and mm,
Yeah,
historically, it hasn't been considered a drill-ready technique, like IP, for example. Um,
right.
but I think that we're watching how this technique is moving on. So, what do you think that are going to be the next steps on the MT subjects in general? I'm thinking about the correlation between IP and
Empty.
between MT and IP. I think
Yes,
I think
yes,
that we have chatted about this many times, but
yes.
I think
That's right.
that there are the possibility of uncovering where the charge is being stationary during the inductive phenomena. So I
Yes.
think that there is a way to obtain IP signaling through MT. So I would like to hear you about this matter.
Yeah, no, I mean, as you said, I mean, we discussed that, and I read a little bit about this topic, and indeed, I mean, you can get IP from the time series that you are collecting with a special, I mean, of course, you need to process the data and extract this IP effect from the AMT data. And also, I mean, if you still remember that probably at the moment, the joint inversion between a 3D joint inversion between IP and MT data, it could add another value on both MT and IP, right? And in terms of improvement for the method for mineral exploration, I mean, probably like the hardware should be also like modified a little bit to make it easier for data acquisition, if you ask me on the hardware level, you know. But yes, no, the point of extracting IB from AMT is very interesting, and it will be maybe the next development, and also the joint inversion, MT and IB. Yeah. I believe that there are a couple of 2D and 1D joint inversion, AMT and IP, but never heard about 3D inversion. If there is any information from anyone, will be great to share it with us.
Will do. Will do. I think we're reaching to our end, and I would like to express our huge grateful feeling right now towards you. I'm representing Seje with these words, and we are really new. We are reaching our first year. We already reached our first year. We are not any formal institution. We're just a bunch of guys that we love what we do, and we like to share it with each other and with the rest of the people. And having you here is a milestone for us. And today we're going to be celebrating our second Geophysicist Day here. And this event is a very big part of this celebration. Um, again, we're really thankful of you. Gracias a todos los asistentes por sus preguntas, por sus interacciones. Ha sido una gran sesión y realmente no queda más que agradecimiento de nuestras partes hacia ustedes y ojalá que la mayor cantidad de los que están aquí presentes estén en Santiago hoy día y puedan asistir a nuestra reunión que vamos a tener de camaradería esta noche. Así que muchísimas gracias. Thanks, Nasser, again. Thanks
Muchas
to
Thank you
gracias.
everyone.
very much. Thank
And
you very much, guys.
Gracias.
And it was a pleasure to discuss with you.
Gracias.
And thank you again, Fernando and Juan, for this invitation. And yeah, muchas gracias de nuevo.
Muchas
Muchas
gracias. Thank you.
gracias.
muchas gracias a
Chao,
todos.
chao.
Que estén muy bien.
Chao, chao.